Classic Restos is proudly brought to you by Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, and Pace Farm. And as a big thanks to Shannons, I return to Hershey, Pennsylvania. On last week's show, the amazing Hershey swap meet and car corral featured. So this week, here is the second part of the Hershey meet to chop up and throw into the mix. It's time for the AACA Eastern Fall Nationals on this week's episode of Classic Restos, where it proves that there is more to Hershey than just chocolates. The AACA Eastern Fall Meet happens in October each year in the parking lots of Hershey Park and the Giant Centre. The Eastern Division AACA National Fall Meet takes place during the first week in October. The Hershey region began hosting the show back in 1955 and has done so ever since. Hershey is considered one of the largest antique automobile shows and swap meet markets in the United States. There can be up to 1,500 show cars on the field. Each year, the show attracts visitors from all over the United States and now many countries throughout the world. Some of the most unusual cars and parts can also be found at Hershey. I guess that it goes without saying, if you love antique cars, Hershey is the place to be, where they've been shifting gears for 55 years. Moving through the Eastern Fall Nationals for 2019 here in the gorgeous Hershey region. And we're starting today's show with a bit of a showstopper. Well, it's actually a plural. We've got two vehicles here in one. We're going to start with the first, which is an incredible Packard. How you doing, Paul?
Good. How are you, Fletch?
Good. Now, this is amazing. It's towing what we call in Australia a caravan. It's the early fifth-wheel design, but more on that in a moment. Let's talk about the car. Tell us the year and how you came about finding this.
This is a 1928 Packard 443. It was originally purchased out in California in 1928. Not sure who it was, but it was obviously, pretty prominent person based off of the colors. It appears that it was always yellow, so it is bright and sharp and snappy. From there, it went to the East Coast. We would say probably in the 40s or 50s, actually. And then in 55 or so, the car was sold to John Hawkinson out of Saranac Lake. He brought it back to his barn and put it into his collection. Didn't really exercise it that much. When we came across it in 2016, the motor was all apart and kind of missing quite a bit of pieces here and there. But we resurrected it and put it together to the point where it runs and drives pretty well. It will roll out at 60 miles an hour without a problem. Of course, without the caravan in back of it. Pretty unique car. It is, again, it's a 28 443. It is the road king of what Packard, and it's what people highly tout as far as a car goes to get it out there on the road.
What's the significance of the 443?
It's 143 inches as far as the wheelbase goes. It's the fourth series. So in 28, 4 was for 28. The 43 was for the 143 inch wheelbase.
Paul, the Packard was always an incredible motor car, very opulent, high-end car. The Detroit tour with Fletch, we do each year. We drive past the old Packard plant. There's just so much history there. These vehicles were incredible. And this car, being the roadster style vehicle that it was, and being yellow, it would have been a stunning car back in its day, complete too, with that really cool door around on the passenger side. The golf bag, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing that the golf bags today are a lot larger, and then the golf bags yesterday were a lot smaller, and they did fit into that compartment. Pretty cool.
What amazes me is that the vehicle, being so old, has been left patinaed, and this is an incredible thing as well. An unrestored vehicle, complete with its rust. It's how you found it, and I really admire that. It is absolutely brilliant. Even the convertible roof as well. It's a step back in time here, isn't it?
Very rustic, that's for sure.
Now, speaking of opulent and a high-end car, the hood ornament, isn't that incredible?
Yes, the goddess of speed is what it's referred to.
Talking of sleek and sexy, this thing has to be powered. Tell us about the engine.
It's a straight 8. It's the big 8. It's not. It's the first or the beginning of the Super 8. So this has got 384 cubic inches, roughly about 120 horsepower, and it does get out there and move. Has no problem powering that caravan and back.
Paul, we move on to this caravan in the back. Now, this is a jaw-dropping thing. This, first of all, it's the only one apparently in the United States of America, right?
It's the only one in this configuration. So it's a 1930 Curtiss Aero Camper. Glenn Curtiss, who was an aviator, loved travel, and that's what inspired him to build this series of campers, which ended up going into the Airstream, as a matter of fact.
It's incredible. It's the first of the fifth wheel, and the mounting point on the back of the car, in the centre of that wheel, and the tyre around the outside, actually acting as a shock absorber or a vibration dampener, whatever way you want to look at it. And that in itself too is interesting.
Absolutely, and there's a big rubber ball that's underneath the bottom of the shaft that goes down into it, and again, it acts as a shock absorber, and it's a good analogy of exactly what it is. Definitely the first air ride suspension fifth wheel.
Now we look at the outside of this van, and it's soft, it's padded. Now straight away, when that'd just keep sound down as well, like rain. It'd have insulating properties as well. It's a fairly advanced structure for 1928.
Absolutely, and it's very light too. They called it oilcloth, is what they put on. And the oilcloth act as a weather protectant to the car itself, and also as the insulation you mentioned, it does have like a particle board. An early particle board is what insulates the sound. What's interesting is the fellow that purchased this in 1930 actually didn't use it as a camper. He brought it home, put it in the garage, and said, "Someday we're going to go camping." And unfortunately, it never got back out again. And again, it is a time capsule. This is the second show that it's been out to since 1930. This is the second time that it's been out since 1930. This is the first time it's been driven on the highway. As cool as this vehicle is, I am honored to say that Classic Restos is the first interview that we've had on this for this vehicle, and this is the first time that I've been on TV as well. So thank you.
You're welcome. There you go. Groundbreaking news. The one of the most incredible vehicles in terms of originality here in the United States of America on the show. Paul, it's been wonderful catching up, and thanks for bringing it along here at Hershey.
Likewise. Thanks, Fletch.
The Mini Cooper S is a real classic. It won the Monte Carlo Rally 4 times, plus the Bathurst 500.
For us, it's like the Italian job every time we drive it. You know, Michael Caine racing through the streets of Turin.
The good thing is, Shannons really understand our passion.
That's why Shannons insure our classic, our daily drive, and now even our home.
Call Shannons on 13 46 46. Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts.
In 2020, why not consider a Detroit tour with Fletch? Detroit, the automotive epicenter. It will leave you gobsmacked. Imagine experiencing where automotive history on a grand scale began. Stay in fine accommodation, taking in some of the best museums and private car collections on the planet. Book your 2020 Detroit tour with Fletch. Moving through the paddock here at Hershey for 2019. Time to talk to this guy here. How you doing, Rod?
Very good, Fletch.
That's good. You'd have to be happy driving what's behind us here, right?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate.
You are. Now, the reason that I'm having a chat to this gentleman is because you don't see one of these cars every day. A 1969 Roadrunner. It's a matching numbers original Hemi car, 426 Hemi. Obviously, it's been restored. Concourse condition. What can you tell us about it, Rod?
Well, I bought it from a collector in Maryland about 3 years ago, and he deals just in exquisite cars, and this is consistent with his collection and the cars that I try to acquire myself.
Mark from Shannons and myself coming to the grounds this morning, unbeknownst to yourself, you're a couple of cars ahead. Well, of course, in this car you'd be ahead of most. As soon as I looked at you, I thought, if I see this guy today, I've got to have him on the episode. It's a beautiful car. And what I also love about it, and I know I mentioned this before, is the narrow wheels, steelies, painted the same colour as the car, with your hubcaps. That is just so synonymous for the era.
It is, and that's what they did with the Roadrunner. It was kind of a no-frills, high-performance car with the Hemi motor, and didn't have the fancy wheels. It had dog dish hubcaps and color-keyed wheels to the body, and so it's pretty unique.
When we look at this car for 1969, Rod, 426 horsepower. You do the kilowatt conversion to that. There's not many cars out there on the road that are that. Incredible horsepower for its time.
Well, that's right, Fletch. That's absolutely right. There's just this was pretty much the top of the food chain at the time.
Did you ever think for a moment that you'd end up with this matching numbers Hemi car?
I didn't. For a long time, that would have been a very elusive goal, but I've been fortunate.
They're quite an amazing thing. There's other engines out there, do a few mods to, and you can get the same power as a Hemi. But aesthetically, it's the surprise almost when you pop the hood and bang, there's the elephant engine. There's just something about the look of these things.
Absolutely. When you look at these hemispherical head valve covers, it's almost magic.
Rod, thank you very much for your time here today. I've really enjoyed talking to you and looking around the car. It's fantastic, mate. Thanks for turning up.
You too, Fletch. I appreciate it.
Time for Linda now. How are you?
Well, I am good, Fletch. How are you?
Fantastic. This is a gorgeous car, a 1956, a Dodge Custom Royal, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So how do you feel having this car? Like through the eyes of a lady, the bling, the cosmetic side, what does this car do for you?
It's quite a privilege to have it among all these other beautiful cars, too. And my husband does all the restoration work, so he does such a wonderful job, and I really enjoy the car.
Isn't that what it's all about? This is a flawless car. This row of cars along here at Hershey, they're all incredible, row after row after row. You can almost do an interview with nearly anyone and not go wrong in terms of the quality. Now, I'd just like to point out, too, that back in the mid-50s, Dodge, Chrysler and DeSoto were the only three that had Hemis, and they had all different displacements. This one here being the Dodge 315 cubic inches, and these were the cars to catch back in the mid-50s. The performance of these things was amazing, Linda.
Yes, and this is a D500, so it has all the best of the crop, and it has electric motors, electric windows and seats, and all of the extra special things.
Isn't that incredible for a 1956 car here in the United States? Power steering, and as Linda has alluded to, the power seat. I mean, how incredible is that? And of course, the power windows, all working very, very nicely, of course, as well. Now, tell us about the interior with the black and white. tell us your thoughts there.
Okay, that was the original interior, so we checked that out and got the same and had it done very well. My husband again put it all in, so yes, it's original.
David has done a wonderful job. I really respect his knowledge and his experience here. As I said earlier, a flawless restoration on this gorgeous car. These have got such fantastic history. The mid-50s was very, very interesting for Mopar. A lot of performance cars came from mid-50s. These guys, they started the ball rolling. And they also did some outlandish shapes as well, which kept cars very interesting. And as we know, very rocket-inspired type cars and with outlandish shapes. And that's what it was all about. Now, we look into the rear of the car, in the trunk area, that's the original trunk lining in there.
Yes, it is. Yes.
We've come along all these decades, and it's just outstanding to see something original from the mid-50s in such good condition. So Linda, back in high school, what car did you have?
Oh, I had a 55 Dodge in high school. It was green and cream and wasn't nearly as pretty as my restored one now. But I did. I drove a convertible around.
You did well. I had a 3-speed push bike.
Yes.
Now, inside, we look at the dashboard, the instrumentation, we look along the dash area. That's just pristine. It's a beautiful design, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it has all the types of things that go on it, and including the clock and the radio, etc.
Well, there you go. Well, Linda, lovely talking to you. I think it's just wonderful. The whole paddock is full of just people enjoying themselves here at Hershey with the classic cars.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Fletch. Yes.
You're welcome. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, thanks.
And if you own a classic, it just has to be insured with Shannons. Why not pick up the phone and give Shannons a call for a quote and a chat on 134646. Enjoying classic restos? Well, there are around 330 episodes awaiting you on the Shannons Club, along with a heap of other really cool stuff. For more information, visit shannons.com.au.
When I was a kid, I loved cars.
I've been a motoring enthusiast all my life.
My life is hot rods, designing them, building them, and racing.
Hand-built with a stainless steel roof.
It won the Monte Carlo Rally 4 times.
Like Dad, I've always been a Ford man.
In '71, this was the fastest four-door car in the world.
Insurance? Shannons, of course.
Heron Forbes Machinery House has been family owned and operated for over 85 years, and it's easy to see why. Planning on welding? Look at these welding tables and clamps, air compressors and different air tools, sandblasting cabinets, through to spray guns. Everyone is welcome at Machinery House. There are competitive freight rates around Australia, and you can buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. So remember, Hare & Forbes has the range. It's time for some grandeur on today's show. How are you, George?
I'm doing wonderful, Fletch. How about yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful. Look at you here this afternoon. You've got your friends, you've got your table out, your chairs, this gorgeous machine here, a 1933 Packard.
That is correct. We're having a great day and the sun finally came out.
I have to ask you, how do you feel when you drive this car? Does it have an effect on you?
I feel like I'm part of royalty. These cars were the choice of royalty, and prior to the Depression, they had 98% of the world luxury car market. The Queen of England had a number in her barn. Joseph Stalin loved these cars. He had 3 or 4 of these. The Tsars of Russia had these cars. So I feel like I'm in good company for most part.
It is an amazing car. Now, in terms of the opulent state that it's in now, the restoration, when was that done?
I completed this took me 4 years. I do all the work myself. I do the upholstery, the body, mechanical, electrical, with help from some of my friends. But it's been a passion of mine since 1968, and I've restored about 11 cars just for myself. It wasn't my occupation, it was an avocation or a hobby, and had a great time doing it.
It's absolutely gorgeous. In terms of prior history, do you know who owned the car?
I've got it back to 1959, and it was owned by a fellow by the name of Herb, and he was an architect in Chicago. And prior to that, the original car owner was a bank owner and president, who was probably the only type of person who could own this car. This car in 1933 was twice the cost of the average new home. So the average home in 33 would sell for around $2,000. This car was $4,000. And people like Clark Gable and Earl Flynn had this particular model. There were only 90 built, and there are approximately 7 left in the world now.
George, when any of us restore a vehicle, if we restore a planer type car, if you will, it's still an astronomical amount of work. When we're in the level of cars we are here, the restoration goes to a different level again. You've got to source parts or make parts. How did you find this particular restoration? Was it a nightmare, or did things go to plan as you wanted them to?
It was, there were some difficulties in it, but it was one of my easier restorations. Having done other ones, I have a number of people that I know across the country that are into Packards, and so my sources are nationwide and international, so I can usually find the parts, if not have to make them. I've done other cars that were far tougher. I completed a 37 Packard, which was here 2 years ago, and I had 4,200 hours in it, plus all the materials, and a long time, but it was a perfect car. It scored 400 out of 400 points here. This is a photograph of the second owner of the car. He's currently 96. This photo was taken in 1949, and his father was Opie Reed, who was the most prolific novelist in the 1800s and a personal friend of Mark Twain. And one of the books is titled My Travels with Mark Twain.
George, tell us some of the features that this car had back in 1933.
This car was a very powerful car. As a Packard Super Rated, developed 155 horsepower. The average car, such as a Ford or a Chevy, a Ford that year had 60 horsepower. So it was a very powerful car. In addition, it had some great innovations. This car has a Bajor oiling system. It automatically oils 13 locations on the chassis of this car every 50 miles through a vacuum system, puts 2 drops of oil in each one of the moving parts. In addition, this car has ride control. You can set the shock absorbers for either rough roads or smooth roads and everything in between through a knob on the dashboard. It also has power brakes in 1933 with 4 settings: a light setting for a woman driver and a heavy setting for masculine drivers, and anywhere in between. So some great innovations on this particular automobile.
George, wonderful catching up with you. I'll let you get back to your wine and your olives, and thank you so much for your time.
It was a pleasure. Good seeing you again.
Interesting car, this one, the Franklin. How are you, Patrick?
I'm doing great, Fletch. How are you?
Good, thank you. Now, it's your uncle's car, right?
That is correct.
That's nice of you to take it out for the day.
Well, he's off gathering the trailer for us for the evening, but I'm just do the mechanical work on it.
Awesome stuff. The Franklin, she's an old classic, this one. What were the years of manufacture for the Franklin?
Franklin was in production from 1902 to 1934.
I find it intriguing as well. We've got this car from the beginning of the last century, air-cooled, right?
Correct.
Now, how does that go in the middle of a desert on a 110-degree day?
On extreme heat situations, it runs fairly well, considering, as opposed to other cars of different manufacturers, and especially of water-cooled systems. The efficiency really doesn't change of the engine.
That's incredible. I guess also same applies in freezing conditions too?
A little more difficult, but they have an apparatus to install in the hood front to reduce airflow.
So that apparatus, I guess, has a Venetian blind effect where you can open and close it?
That's correct.
And that would act as, I guess, like a thermostat to keep it at a pretty well a flat sort of a running temperature?
More primitive, yeah. It would just restrict airflow through the engine, so it would keep the temperature up higher.
Has it been a good car, this one?
It's had its ups and downs.
You learn patience.
Yeah, it forces you to learn patience. So
I just think it goes back to the bracket of having the utmost respect for something that's so old. Technology, as mentioned, beginning of the last century, and a very, being air-cooled, and yet being so successful from way back then.
yeah, it's had its knowledge of just chugging along. So even in extreme heat, like you were saying, and just on the cold days, it can take a little bit to get started, but it perseveres.
What sort of temperatures happen around the cylinders, Patrick?
Around 300 Fahrenheit.
That's amazing stuff, eh? There you go. A little bit of information about the cooling system on a Franklin. Tremendous stuff. Look after it, Patrick. You're doing a great job so far.
Thank you, Fletch.
Well, there you have it. Just some of the AACA Eastern Fall Nationals here in Hershey, Pennsylvania for 2019. As I say at the end of every episode of Classic Restos, until next week, no matter where you're watching the show from, please ride and drive safe. I'm Fletch, and I thank you very much for watching. You can like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ClassicRestosTV and watch catch-up episodes at shannons.com.au. Classic Restos is proudly brought to you by Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, and Pace Farm.